listen, that's a radical thing to name, and like I don't know. Sometimes I hate musical theater. I hate musical theater.
Welcome, folks. My name is Brisa Areli Muñoz, and I'm the Director of Artistic Innovation and Emergent Magic at Musical Theater Factory. MTF equips artists to create musical stories as a collective force for justice, healing, and radical imagination. We're based out of New York City, but we support folks all across the country and internationally as well. And I'm joined here with my co-leaders, Andrea Negrete, Abigail Grubb, and we are introducing you to Fast Forward, which is a brand new podcast of ours, where we're thinking about fast forwarding to a time where musical storytellers are valuable assets across every sector in society. And we're really excited to invite you in on this journey as we share with you a little bit more about who we are, what we do, what we're excited about, and bring you into the conversation. Let's take a moment to talk a little bit about our distinct roles here at MTF. I know I introduced myself as the Director of Artistic Innovation and Emergent Magic.
That's juicy.
Yeah. That felt important to put in that title.
Yeah.
Particularly because we support artists in the development of their work across every part of their process. But I think the emergent magic part felt useful as well, because a lot of times when we're holding space for artists to share work in community, we've also created moments where things are happening in live time on the spot, where we're inviting a musician up to score a poet who's going to speak and freestyle everything that's come up in the room. And there's this sort of energy and this magic, it feels like, that occurs when there are folks who are daring to be vulnerable in space and to be present with whatever is coming up for them in that moment. And so those are the kinds of spaces that I get really excited to activate. But I'm also a theater director and a cultural worker and a healing practitioner. And so that's why I'm so excited to hold this title that I know all of us were thinking a little bit about. What are the ways that we can take the role of artistic director or managing director or communications director and turn the ideas on their head a little bit. So I'd love, Abigail, for you to talk a little bit about your title and also what it means for you and how it encompasses all of the many hats that you play at MTF.
Yeah, so I am the Director of Interdependence and Collective Care at Musical Theater Factory. That would, all of our roles are in this fashion and form, but it's as if you had an executive director, a managing director, your director of finance, director of HR, executive producer, and that might be about it.
Like emotional support,
Director of Operations.
honestly.
Director of Operations.
Yeah.
Yes, you add that one to the list.
Yeah.
All encapsulated into one, and the purpose of that being, holding true that everything within an organization impacts one another. And so in many ways I think about my role as really holding the way information flows and holding the humans that work in these roles to ensure that we don't burn ourselves out doing such deep and important work. And in my personal practice, not only I've worked many roles. I started in fundraising, institutional giving primarily. I've been a producer. I've been a director. I have been a director of operations. Yeah. And I am also currently a consultant. I work as a photographer, videographer, and filmmaker, and I also am a director of theater, primarily new musicals and new plays.
And a curandera.
That's right. Herbalist. Yeah. There are many hats.
Yes.
No, I appreciate it.
And Andrea,
I want to hear
Which
about
are both
you.
correct. It's Andrea or Andrea.
That's right.
They're both the right way. So I'm the Director of Access and Advocacy, which is a mashup of marketing, PR, communications director, visual graphic designer, an advocate, really. I try my best to make sure that we're centering people in every decision that we make, and that there are multiple access points for folks to get into this work. And outside of that, I am an actor. I am a visual artist, a facilitator, a big sister, which feels important.
Emerging tattoo artist.
Yes.
That's right. Claim it.
Like a perpetual, like, new hobby starter.
Aren't we all?
It's true.
Correct.
It's true.
Correct.
We could go down the whole list of all those.
The fourth member of MTF's ELC is AriDy Knox, who sadly, due to a medical emergency, was unable to be with us physically. They do, however, have a short message to share with all of you. To learn more about them and all of our staff members, visit www.mtf.nyc.
Hello, hello, hello. This is AriDy Knox, and I am co-executive director of Musical Theater Factory, specifically the director of Decolonization and Sustainability. And I am coming at you to remind you to subscribe to The Vibe. The Vibe is to get all of the information you could possibly desire about the Musical Theater Factory community. We let you know what our artists are doing in the world. We let you know what they're doing in our home, in our community base, and it has lots of tips and tricks and links to help you further your career, whether you're a director, an actor, a writer, or just an audience member who wants to stay plugged in. If you want to be tapped into all things amazing in New York, especially within MTF, subscribe to The Vibe.
So we operate in circles here. Each of our ELC directors are kind of leading a circle that is corresponding to the title. So we have Artistic Circle, ICC, Interdependence and Collective Care, right? And so on and so forth. What I love about the Emergent Magic part is that it speaks to artistics, like, flexibility and intention to be bespoke to every artist's needs for their piece and their process and their personhood, like all those three things together. And it is something that is very apparent in Artistic Circle, but also I think goes across the entire organization as we try to remain flexible and really, like, lean into this idea of emergent magic, inspired by emergent strategy, right? Mm-hmm. So love that. And then with the interdependence of it all, it's like, what I love about that title is that it's the acknowledgement that we are all connected and we all impact each other, and that we can only do this together, and if we're considering the other as well as ourselves. And
so when we were going through our strategic planning process last year, I remember a moment we were like, okay, now we're looking at the operating model. What does it look like to have an operating model that's, outside of what you would traditionally see in an arts organization? Our values that we've come up with really felt important to translate into something that could be of good use, and not just words that live on a page, words that live on a website. I think that the intention with these titles was really like, how can we activate our values at every level of the organization? So with my role as the director of Interdependence and Collective Care, and I think this is true across all of our staff roles, right? Like, I think it really speaks to, a more nuanced way of holding space in these organizations, and
holding ourselves accountable to these values.
Right, exactly. Because, as the director of Interdependence and Collective Care, or, having held the role of managing director, interim managing director, your responsibility is really to your people. And I think that's so abundantly true at MTF. Like, we have always been an organization that's built of humans, regardless of where we've been itinerant, when we were at Playwrights Horizons, now down at the music building, regardless of what our physical space is, like, the people are what have always made this organization, and taking care of people is, really underrated, quite honestly.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks so much for sharing. It's exciting to do this work with you all. And I'm also just so conscious of the field at large right now, and the fact that for many years, the developmental spaces have been dwindling, not only in New York City, but across the country. And I don't know how folks imagine that work will be ready to be presented in producing houses if there aren't actually developmental hubs. And so it's been a real joy to find the ways in which we can be of direct service to artists. And I want to take a moment to kind of take us back to the inception of MTF. Okay, so I want everyone to imagine for a moment that it's 2014. Yeah, close your eyes. That's right. That's a good one. So imagine that it's 2014. and you're at the center of Manhattan, just south of Times Square, the bright lights, people are racing to catch their Broadway show, or maybe heading to dinner or going to a shop, or maybe just deciding to be present in the middle of the madness. I don't know who would do that, but here we are. And I want you to imagine that near the corner of 39th Street and 8th Avenue, a trans woman decided to create a theater company out of none other than the back of a gay porn studio. So this is our founder, Shakina Nafak, someone who is a dear friend, collaborator, and colleague. She's a brilliant artist and performer and writer and organizer and coalition builder, and someone who decided to bring all of her musical theater friends together and decided to create a space where folks felt safe to create works. I think that at the time, what felt really important was to be creating outside of commercial pressures. There were times when someone would decide, I want to make a 18-person musical, but folks would never fund that, so I guess that means I can't write it. And Shakina was like, no, you can write it, let's do it. And all that I've heard about those early years was just how much those rooms were filled with community and excitement and energy and fervor. And at the time, there was a huge kind of volunteer culture that was present. It was like folks were, setting up the spaces and, sharing their works and, just finding ways to make it happen with nothing, with very little resource, just, with the will for it to live. And it's so exciting to see the ways that MTF has operationalized itself actually over the past, 12 years?
Yeah, 12 years.
To be a place that is providing artists with thriving living wages. But it all couldn't have happened unless Shakina had decided that she wanted to make space for trans folks and queer folks and, folks of color, everybody, really. Mm-hmm. To come together and create brand new works. So I'm curious, Abigail, you shared that you've been with the org, now 8 years?
8 years.
Which is longer than me. I think I'm about to celebrate my 4-year anniversary, which I'm excited about.
I came in a couple of months after you.
That's right. So help us paint a picture of the history of this place as you knew it then and how you've witnessed it evolve.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, in some ways, the organization has changed significantly. In other ways, the very core of it still remains the very same. I joined the organization in 2018. Or no. Yeah? No. 2014?
No, maybe 2016. Oh, God, math.
Fuck.
2016? No,
that would be 10
God.
years. So
this
it would have been 2018. So I joined the organization.
This is why we're artists.
2018 does not sound like it was 8 years ago.
Well, it was 8 years ago. I joined the organization in 2018 at the time, primarily institutional giving. I was very much on a fundraising track, and my former boss at the Atlantic at the time, Nick Lukenbach, would come to me and was like, we just got a new artistic director. That was May and Teo at the time. And, we're really looking for some fundraising support. And I think that, your values and your ethics are a little bit maybe more in line with what MTF is doing. At the time, I think we were mostly volunteer labor. Yeah. There was a larger staff. I think we had close to maybe 10 to 12 people that were technically on the team. Yeah. But the organization was in pretty severe financial troubles. Anyway, all that to say is the very first night I was on the job, this is some MTF lore. And the reason that if you ever come to the factory floor, you will see a check that is framed prominently on the wall. We were about $10,000 in debt. Not sure how we were going to make payroll for myself, who was literally my first day, and Mayan, who had maybe been there for a week. Yeah. Chiang, who is an artist who's still with us today.
Shout out Chiang.
Was also our social media manager at the time. Fun story.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, hey, I did not know that.
You didn't know that. Well, here we go. But they had a concert that night at Joe's Pub of some of their work that they were presenting. And at that concert was this older man named Brian Snyder, who, this was their first event as artistic director, was there and just started chatting this man up. And he was this eccentric guy who was like very into political fundraising, and on the spot just like wrote a check that got us out of debt and sort of set MTF on its path to like being able to survive that crisis and into the future. So
That could be you.
no.
Also, Brian, we lost touch with you. Where are
love to
you?
see
If
you.
you see this,
We
can you
miss
please
you.
come back? There's so many things happening.
Come on, Brian.
and Amy was his assistant who wrote the
Okay,
check.
Amy.
Oh, and the check was also written in pink pen, and so it couldn't be cashed.
No.
And we had to track down his assistant. It was like a whole thing.
That's so funny.
But we did end up getting a proper check. That old check that was written in pink marker remains on the factory floor as like an era of that time and like an homage to Brian Snyder. But anyway, that's lore. The organization has changed significantly, as I shared. We were mostly a volunteer staff. We were in residence with Playwrights Horizons, but as the organization has sort of grown and evolved, the question has always remained of like, how can we continue to support our community and support them in this era, right? Not even moving from an Marxist ideology, I think in a lot of ways that even our new strategic plan has found a home and is still those roots in those, workers owning the means of production, which is something that was near and dear to Shakina as she was founding it, and something that I think that is still an ethic that's shared. Like, how can we ensure that our artists and the intellectual property that they're creating is still owned by them and like still within the working class artist, and
Hence the factory of it all.
the factory of it all, right? There was also there's been rub with the factory of it all. People were like, oh well, factory exploitative labor practices and like all of the things that come with
Isn't
that.
that more telling to like America's history with labor?
That part.
Like the fact that we jump straight to exploitative labor. Anyway.
Totally.
And I also I also want to double tap. I feel like MTF has also been like an epicenter in some ways.
Yeah.
Like you speak about 4x15s. I think a lot of organizations have adopted that model, but what people don't understand is we did it first. Like we did it first.
Yeah.
Shakina had that idea. It came from the assembly line, and since then, we've seen organization after organization after organization adopt this framework of holding 15-minute excerpts of new musicals, and then holding that space for feedback, holding that space for audience development.
Talk about the butterfly effect.
Talk about the butterfly effect.
I know. And what's so awesome now is that the work that we continue to do is be really thoughtful about how we can support artists at every stage of their process, from having just the kernel of an idea towards being almost production ready and everywhere in between. And I think something that's important to recognize about what MTF does is that we think about dramaturgy as a liberatory tool. And so it's very strange that even sometimes in our industry, folks might still be asking, well, what is the function of a dramaturg and why is it valuable? But the reality is that I can be a really harsh critic of work that I see because I care so deeply about its potential impact. And I often say that when I feel like works aren't as successful as they could be, I often say it's because there was not enough time spent with a dramaturg, which is a person who helps to, it's not just about history and getting history accurate, but about story structure, about flow, about world building, about how we get from one place to the next and keep audiences engaged and interested and compelled. And so that feels at the core of what we do. And I just also want to name that the work that we do is sometimes just bite-sized and really tries to right-size exactly the question or conundrum that an artist is trying to solve. But it also is about longitudinal relationships with artists over time. And so if you haven't gotten a chance to get to know us and you are an artist, you don't even have to be someone who identifies as a musical theater creator. We made an intentional choice to move away from musical theater factory, which we still are, but to start calling us ourselves, MTF, because we were curious at being expansive about who it was that was coming through our doors for development support. So you might be someone who is a musician who's never been in theater before, but has a concept album and is curious about the ways in which their work might translate to narrative storytelling. Or you might be an artist who is in theater and you're curious about what's the function that technology could play in my work. This is the place for you. This is the place to experiment. This is the place to build community. And we're really excited to introduce this brand new program to you, to invite you into the conversation with us.
So if we believe that artists are integral and integratable into every sector of society, right? It's worth the thought experiment of like, how can we get there? And I think that's a lot of the spirit that's undergirding this podcast is like, we have some ideas, we have some thoughts about how it could go. But while holding the like emergent magic of it all and the bespokeness that we try to approach every artist or every project or every, problem in front of us, like it necessitates a diversity of thought. And part of this podcast is an invitation to be thought partners with us, envisioning beyond what we can see just internally, what those roadways might look like.
It's a really important point. I teach at a lot of different institutions, and I have encountered a lot of students who have gotten their BAs or their BFAs in theater, and when they enter the world, the moment that they can't find work in our sector is the moment that they feel like they now have to switch to some other sector, and that the road is kind of done for them if they're not getting the part that they want, or if they're not getting commissioned to write a show. And I think that inherently speaks to what we're taught about what it means to be an artist, which is only through the lens of entertainment or a show.
And fame or celebrity.
Totally.
Right.
And what I have to remind these folks when they come to me saying that they think they just need to switch fields entirely is like, what if you could realize and fully grasp all of the skills that already exist within you because you are an artist?
Right.
And what if you stayed curious about the ways in which you might be able to interact with other fields and have really meaningful impact by bringing the skills that already exist within you?
Right.
And I think that that's part of the work that we want this podcast to do, is we want for artists to not only recognize that their value is so much more than just whether or not they're in a show right now, and to start thinking creatively about what's the function that their skills and their artistry can bring to the world. And especially in a world that feels incredibly overwhelming and chaotic, and artists are needed. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the artists are needed more than ever.
Correct.
So the first sector that we'll be looking at in this Fast Forward podcast is that of health and wellness. And this got determined because we are in collaboration with an artist, Modesto Flaco Jimenez, an incredible friend of mine and a dear collaborator. Flaco is the artistic director of Oya Group, which is a Bushwick-based arts organization that supports with social service and art development and media. And Flaco was the caregiver of his grandmother, Mercedes. And so he decided to create a piece about her life, because when he became her caregiver, he started to recognize how difficult it was as a Latino man in New York City to have access to resources and support for how to care for her. And he had a lot of questions and not a lot of answers, and it required a lot of fact-finding. And he recognized that it shouldn't be this hard to get access to resources. If we think about the statistics about dementia and Alzheimer's in society, if we zoom in specifically to the United States, it's something like 1 in 4 people either have experienced or know someone for whom has been affected by it. So the prevalency of this disease is pretty astounding, considering how difficult it is to access resources and support for it. And so this project was born. And so fast forward, and this first case study is going to zoom in on Mercedes and this artistic project that has been inspired by her life and legacy. And the way that this fast forward content will unfold is that we're going to be inviting stakeholders from across the health and wellness sector to be in conversation with us about the relevancy of this project to support not only folks with dementia, but their caregivers and their loved ones. And I'm really excited for this to be this first project because there are a lot of questions that we have about the impact that this work can have, not just in New York City, but beyond. And there are some questions that we have about how we can take this incredible multimedia installation, theatrical piece, XR experience, and find ways to put it out across the country for senior centers all across the United States. But there are a lot of gaps in our knowledge around how to make that happen. Mm-hmm. We know the impact because we've seen it and we'll hear about it throughout the course of this podcast. But I think that there are still questions that are left unanswered that this podcast will hope to uncover and reveal. And so I'm curious to see how far we can take the conversation. I'm curious to see what questions are still left. And I'm curious about the ways that our audience can help us to source the answers to help us continue to do this meaningful work. So I'm really excited about this work. We hope that this allows you to understand a little bit more who we are as MTF and what we're doing here. We're so excited to have you in on this ride for us. I'm so grateful to be here with Abigail and Andrea, and stay tuned for more. We can't wait to invite you in where we're fast forwarding to a future where artists really matter.
Hey there, it's AriDy Knox, Co-Executive Director of Musical Theater Factory, specifically Director of Decolonization and Sustainability, and I am here to remind you that if anyone's got us, we got us. In this time of chaos and insanity, invest in the community that is investing in you. Invest in the We Got Us Fund, a new initiative by MTF to make sure that every single member of our community is not getting paid just a living wage, is not getting paid in exposure, is not getting paid in promises, but it's getting paid a thriving wage. Yeah, you heard me, a thriving wage. Help us ensure that everyone in your community, everyone in our community is able to not just live, but thrive. Invest in the We Got Us Fund today.
Hey everyone, I'm Falan, and thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Fast Forward. I am on the MTF staff as the coordinator of connectivity and systems. And if you want to stay tuned in, please like, subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss future episodes, upcoming releases, and live tapings. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
That's great.
Can you just hold that power cube, or actually unplug the computer? Unplug the computer.
Kill it.
I hope Andy's still rolling.
Dead.